Well, two surface-to-air missiles have been fired at a Russian passenger plane flying over Syrian territory. The pilots managed to maneuver the plane in time, and the missiles nearly missed the aircraft. It's still not clear who fired the missiles. The Russian plane, belonging to Nordwind Airlines, was carrying around 200 passengers. It was returning to Russia after leaving an unspecified resort city in Egypt. Russia's embassy in Damascus is looking into the attack. In December, the foreign-backed militants fighting against the Syrian government fired at a Syrian passenger plane as it was preparing to take off from Aleppo airport. The militants have repeatedly threatened to shoot down passenger planes at Damascus and Aleppo airports. Well, it's a crossover and now to Washington. Joining us is Professor Nabil Mikhail. He's with George Washington University. Many thanks for joining us here on Press TV, Professor Mikhail. Now, it is interesting to note that these missiles were targeting a plane carrying 200 civilian passengers. Is this the future of Syria if these foreign-backed insurgents get what they want?
It's a serious development, and it's very brutal because you are targeting civilians. And the question is, will Russia retaliate? The problem in that type of attack is that you cannot prevent it beforehand. You cannot preempt it because just you have a flying object in the skies and then some projectile is trying to hit it. But if Russia retaliates, it will be a severe act of vengeance. Because just the Russians are ruthless when it comes to repelling any attack. I recall reading the story of how the KGB, the former Soviet intelligence, retaliated when a number of Soviet citizens and officials were killed in Lebanon. You have an interesting account of it in Bob Woodward's book, The Veil. So Russia takes very seriously these actions. They are angry. They can actually become more brutal. It can drag them into acts of retaliation. It can be a non-stoppable action if they are repeated. So I hope no attacks will happen, because otherwise it can kick off a vicious cycle of attack and counterattack. More civilians are killed, more bloodshed is spilled.
Right,
and
now,
more
Professor Mikhail, you did mention
Syria.
that such attacks cannot be preempted, so to speak. But these foreign-backed militants have repeatedly threatened to shoot down passenger planes. Then why are governments from the West and their regional allies giving them these missiles, giving them the funds to buy such weapons to begin with?
Okay, I think let me just answer first the first segment of your question, why you cannot stop them. Because militarily speaking, you cannot locate them. It's a very widespread arena of conflict. Anyone who fires on a projectile, on a flying object, can do it from a position that cannot be eliminated or determined beforehand. As to why does the West support people in Syria who are practicing acts of terror since the attack happened against a plane carrying civilians, it's a big moral test for the West. They basically do not want the current regime in Syria to stay. But they have not established a consensus on how to establish regime change in Syria, so their policy reflects really serious confusion. It's a puzzle. It has become the Syrian puzzle. You are trying to decode the puzzle, but you are using methods that could lead to no solution, to no exit. So the West is still thinking, after 2 years of a very, very blood conflict, what kind of identity do these rebels carry? How to help them? What kind of weapons they should receive? The West has established a moral case for Syria, but it has failed to establish a viable strategy how to resolve the conflict.
Okay.
And again, this will mean more turmoil, more this instability in Syria.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there. That was Professor Nabil Mikhail joining us from studios in Washington. He's with George Washington University. Thank you very much, Professor, for your comments here on Press TV.